The colony on Kepler-7 was meant to be a symbol of unity. 10,000 humans and 5,000 Velthon lived together on a planet that was neither fully human nor fully alien. They built buildings with human designs and Velthon designs standing side by side. They created farms that grew both human food and the strange plants that Velthon needed to survive, but there was no real unity. The humans kept to their section of the colony. The Velthon kept to theirs. When they worked together, they did so because they had to, not because they wanted to. The divide was as clear as a line drawn on a map. Jacob lived in a governor's mansion that combined elements of both species' architecture. It was uncomfortable and strange. Nothing felt right. The chairs were too hard for human backs, but too soft for Velthon bodies. The temperature was kept too cold for humans, but too warm for Velthon. Every room in the house was a compromise that satisfied no one. Lyra seemed comfortable here. She spent her days working with the Velthon scientists and leaders, understanding how the colony functioned. She spent her nights with Jacob, though their first weeks together were awkward. They barely spoke. They slept in separate chambers. Jacob was afraid of Lyra. This was something he could not admit to anyone, but it was true. She was connected to the Velthon collective consciousness. The Velthon could share thoughts and information through a telepathic link. This meant Lyra knew everything. She knew every military strategy that humans had used. She knew where human ships were stationed. She knew the strength and weakness of human weapons. She knew everything about humanity that the Velthon wanted to know. Jacob began to wonder if the marriage had been a trick all along. Perhaps the Velthon had used the peace treaty to make humans lower their guard. Perhaps they had sent Lyra to learn everything and then report back to the Empire. Perhaps when they had gathered enough information, they would attack again and crush humanity completely. One night, Jacob could not sleep. He stood on the balcony of the mansion, looking at the stars. The planet Kepler-7 orbited far from Earth. He was alone on an alien world with a wife he did not trust and a mission he no longer understood. He heard footsteps behind him. Lyra came to stand beside him. "You are afraid of me," she said simply. Jacob did not deny it. There was no point in lying. "Yes," he said. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she did something that shocked Jacob. She took his hand and pressed it against her own forehead. At first, Jacob thought she was attacking him. He tried to pull away, but she held his hand firmly. Then, images and feelings flooded into his mind. He felt them like a rushing wave. He understood things that had no words. He saw the Velthon Empire through Lyra's eyes. He felt her loneliness as a princess. He understood her doubts about her own people. She showed him her fears, her hopes, and her beliefs. Most importantly, she showed him the truth. The Velthon Empire was not united. The Emperor was old and sick. He did not have many years left. The military commanders, led by a general named Kess, were planning something dark. They wanted to use the marriage as an excuse to prepare for war again. They wanted to pretend they were following the treaty while secretly building up their weapons and forces. Once they were ready, they would attack human space one more time. This time, they would not stop until humans were completely destroyed. Lyra had risked her entire future by telling Jacob this. If the other Velthon found out that she had broken the collective consciousness to share secrets with a human, they would consider it a betrayal. She could be executed. She could be stripped of her title. She could be cast out of her own species. Jacob pulled his hand away. He looked at his wife with new understanding. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you betray your own people for me?" "Because my people are wrong," Lyra said. The emotion in her voice was clear now, and it was anger. "We have conquered 17 worlds. We have killed trillions of creatures. We tell ourselves that we are superior, and that conquest is our right. But I do not believe this anymore. I have seen your people fight. I have seen them die for each other. I have seen them choose to save each other instead of running away. The Velthan would never do this. We are strong, but we are empty. Humans are weak, but you are full of something we do not have. What is that? Jacob asked. Purpose, Lyra said. Real purpose. Not the empty purpose of conquest and power. Purpose that comes from caring about something more than yourself. The next morning, Jacob and Lyra met with the leaders of the human section of the colony. They told them about the Velthan plans. At first, the humans wanted to attack immediately. They wanted to fight before the Velthan could prepare. But Jacob stopped them. We cannot fight like this, he said. We cannot win a war against the entire Velthan Empire. But we can prepare. We can make ourselves harder to defeat. And we can use the time that the treaty gives us to build something that the Velthan never expected: real friendship between our species. When a mining accident happened 3 weeks later, everyone on Kepler-7 saw what Jacob meant. 30 human miners became trapped in a deep shaft under the planet's surface. The traditional Velthan rescue method would take 2 days. The humans would die from the poisonous gases in the shaft long before rescue arrived. Lyra and Jacob designed a new rescue method together. They combined human ingenuity with Velthan technology. They used human explosives to carefully break through the rock without causing a collapse. They used Velthan machines to filter the air and create a safe passage. Both species worked together, following Lyra's directions. All 30 human miners and 8 Velthan workers in the shaft were brought to safety. For the first time, humans and Velthan stood together and cheered. They had worked as one team, not as enemies or separate species. They had saved each other's lives. That night, Jacob and Lyra stood together in their mansion. Jacob took his wife's hand without fear this time. Her skin was cool and different, but her grip was strong and certain. We might actually make this work, Jacob said. Lyra squeezed his hand. We will make it work, she said. Because we have to. Because if we do not, billions will die. Jacob pulled her close. For the first time since the marriage ceremony, they were not strangers bound by duty. They were partners bound by a shared belief that peace was possible. They were 2 people from different worlds, standing together against the darkness that threatened to consume them both. Jacob Hayes stood in the darkness of the observation deck, watching the Velthan battle cruiser approach through the void of space. The massive ship was the size of a small moon, its metallic surface gleaming with weapons that could destroy entire cities. He had seen what those weapons could do. He had watched planets burn. For 3 years, humanity had fought against the Velthan Empire. For 3 years, humans died every single day. The Velthan were stronger, faster, and their technology was far beyond what humanity had managed to build. They did not fight to conquer land or resources like humans did. They fought because they believed it was their destiny to rule all living things in the galaxy. Jacob was no longer a young man. His dark hair had streaks of gray now. His face showed the weight of command. He had seen too many of his soldiers die. He had ordered too many attacks that failed. He had made decisions that cost thousands of lives. Now, he was here to make a decision that would change everything. The Earth governments had surrendered. Not completely, but they had agreed to peace talks. The war had broken humanity. Cities were destroyed. Billions were dead. What was left of the human population could not continue fighting. They needed peace, even if peace meant bowing to the Velthan. The peace proposal was strange and harsh. The Velthan did not want money or land or resources. They wanted something more personal. They wanted a marriage. A human leader would marry a member of the Velthan royal family. This marriage would bind the 2 species together and prevent future war. It was meant to show that humans and Velthon could join as one. When the Earth Council had asked for volunteers, Jacob did not hesitate. He stepped forward immediately. Other officers were shocked. Some called him foolish. Some said he was throwing his life away. But Jacob understood the math of survival. If this marriage could end the war and save billions of human lives, then one man's sacrifice was nothing. The Velthon had chosen their princess, Lyra. She was the youngest daughter of the emperor. The Velthon communicated the terms through a sterile message. The marriage would happen on a neutral station. Jacob would be brought to meet the princess. If both sides agreed, the ceremony would take place. The treaty would be signed. The war would end. Jacob watched the battle cruiser dock at the station. He straightened his uniform and walked toward the meeting chamber. His heart beat fast, but his face remained calm. He had learned long ago how to hide his feelings. A commander could not show fear or doubt in front of his troops. The chamber was large and cold. The walls were made of metal, and lights glowed from above. A table sat in the center, and on one side were human diplomats. On the other side were Velthon officials, their tall bodies covered in dark armor. Their skin was pale and smooth like stone. Their eyes were black, with no white around them, and they seemed to look through you rather than at you. Then the princess entered. Lyra was different from the other Velthon. She was taller than the other females, but she moved with a grace that the soldiers did not possess. Her skin was pale white, almost glowing in the light. Her eyes were dark, but they seemed to hold intelligence and something else, something that looked almost like emotion. She wore a long dress made of a material that shimmered like water. On her head was a crown made of metal and stones that caught the light. Jacob stood and looked at her directly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Lyra tilted her head slightly. "You are Jacob Hayes," she said. Her voice was smooth and clear, with an accent that made English sound almost musical. "I am," Jacob replied. "You are the princess." "I am Lyra," she said. "I am told that you have volunteered to marry me to end the war." Jacob nodded. "That is correct." Lyra walked closer to him. She studied his face carefully, as if she was looking at something she had never seen before. "The humans are not what we expected," she said. "We were told you were primitives, weak creatures that should not survive in a harsh galaxy. But you have fought us for 3 years. You have killed many of our soldiers. You are not weak." Jacob did not know how to answer this. Was she complimenting him or insulting him? He decided to speak the truth. "We are not weak," he said. "We are stubborn. Humans do not give up easily. We fight even when we know we cannot win." Lyra smiled. This surprised Jacob. He did not think Velthon could smile. It made her look almost human. "I like that," she said. "I like humans more than I thought I would." The Velthon officials and human diplomats began discussing the terms of the marriage and the treaty. They spoke about borders and trade and military agreements. The words filled the chamber, but Jacob barely heard them. He was watching Lyra. She was watching him too. When the discussions ended, the officials agreed that the marriage would happen in 3 days. Both Jacob and Lyra signed documents written in English and in the Velthon language. The documents were binding under the laws of both species. As Lyra left the chamber, she paused next to Jacob. "I do not know if this will work," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "I do not know if our species can truly be united by marriage. But I believe it is worth trying." Jacob nodded. "So do I," he said. 3 days later, they were married on the station. Thousands of humans and thousands of Velthon gathered to watch. They filled 2 separate sections of a massive chamber. The 2 species did not sit together. They did not mingle, but they watched as Jacob and Lyra made their vows. When it was done, Jacob took Lyra's hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, nothing like human skin. She held his hand firmly, without hesitation. The crowd erupted in noise. Some humans cheered. Some Velthon made sounds that might have been approval. Jacob looked at his new wife. Her face was calm and serious, but her eyes held something that looked almost like hope. Together, they had taken the first step towards something no one had ever tried before. They had created a bridge between two species. Whether that bridge would hold or crumble was still unknown. But for the first time in 3 years, the guns had stopped firing. The war was over. And Jacob Hayes, a man who had sent thousands of people to their deaths, now carried hope in his chest like a new weapon. The human fleet approached the Velthon capital with weapons armed and shields raised. Jacob had insisted on a show of force. He had told the human government that they needed to demonstrate strength in order to be taken seriously. They could not appear desperate or weak. Admiral Gomez commanded the fleet personally. 30 warships moved through space in perfect formation. Their weapons were charged. Their sensors were active. They had enough power to cause serious damage to the orbital defenses around the capital, but they did not attack. Lyra had sent a message through the encrypted channel. It contained a single sentence: "Do not fire. Come alone." Jacob made the decision that shocked everyone. He would go to the capital in a small shuttle with only a pilot. He would meet with Lyra without a full military escort. The human government called it suicide. Admiral Gomez wanted to refuse the order, but Jacob had learned something from Lyra. Sometimes, real power came from showing trust, not from showing weapons. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere and landed at the Imperial Palace. Jacob stepped out of the ship and looked at the structure before him. It was massive and beautiful and completely alien. Everything about it was designed to show power and permanence. Lyra was waiting for him at the entrance. She wore the formal dress of the Empress, a long robe of shimmering material that seemed to contain the colors of the galaxy. A crown sat on her head, made of metal and stones from the first worlds the Velthon had conquered. Jacob walked toward her across the landing platform. Around them, Velthon soldiers stood perfectly still. They watched but did not move. Lyra's face was calm and serious, but when Jacob came close, her eyes changed. The formal mask dropped away. She reached out and took his hand. "You came," she said. "Did you doubt that I would?" Jacob asked. "Yes," Lyra said. She led him inside the palace. "I did not know if the human government would allow you to return. I did not know if you would forgive me for leaving you." Jacob followed her through great halls and along corridors lit by bioluminescent panels. They eventually reached a chamber high in the palace, with windows that overlooked the entire capital city. "Talk to me," Jacob said. "Tell me what happened." Lyra sat down, and Jacob sat beside her. She told him about the ritual combat with General Kess. She described the fight in detail. How Kess had been stronger, but less clever. How she had used knowledge of the fighting forms to overcome his raw power. She told him about the moment she had defeated him and the moment she had claimed the throne. She told him about the military factions that had resisted her rule. She told him about the generals who had accepted her authority immediately because they respected strength. She told him about restructuring the government and eliminating the power structures that Kess had used. Most importantly, she told him about her vision for the future. "The conquest must end," Lyra said. "The Velthon have conquered for so long that we have forgotten how to do anything else. We are strong, but we are hollow. Your people taught me something, Jacob. Humans create meaning through connection with each other. You sacrifice for those you love. You build things that have no purpose except beauty. We have lost the capacity to do these things." Jacob listened and understood. Lyra was not just ruling the Velthon. She was trying to change them fundamentally. to teach them that there was more to existence than conquest and power. "What do you need from humanity?" Jacob asked. "Your help," Lyra said. "And your example. I am going to propose something that will seem insane to my people. I am going to propose that we share worlds, that humans and Velthon live together, learn from each other, build something new." "They will resist," Jacob said. "Many of your people will see this as betrayal. Many will believe you are weak." "I know," Lyra said. "That is why I need you. The humans must show that they are not conquered people. The humans must show that they are choosing to be partners with the Volthon, not because they are forced to, but because they believe it is right." Jacob nodded. He understood what she was asking. The humans would need to rebuild their military strength. They would need to negotiate as equals, not as the defeated side of a war. They would need to prove that they were strong enough to say no if the Velthon ever tried to dominate them again. He sent a message to Admiral Gomez. The message was simple. Stand down. The war is over. Begin negotiations for real partnership. For several weeks, Jacob and Lyra worked together with military officials and government leaders from both species. They designed new treaties, new trading agreements, new rules for shared worlds. They discussed science and technology and art. Slowly, the two species began to understand each other not as enemies, but as partners. Then came the day of the public ceremony. The capital city was filled with Velthon from across the Empire. Human diplomats and military leaders had come from Earth orbit. Everyone gathered in the great amphitheater, a structure so massive that 50,000 beings could stand comfortably within it. Jacob and Lyra stood on a raised platform, visible to everyone. A Velthon priest spoke the words that had been spoken at the Emperor's coronation for 10,000 years. Lyra knelt, and the crown was removed from her head. Then, a new crown was placed upon her head. This crown combined Velthon metal with human elements. It was made of both materials, representing the unity between species. Then Jacob spoke. His words were translated into the Velthon language, and the Velthon words were translated into human languages. "We have fought each other because we did not understand each other," Jacob said. "We saw only differences, not similarities. But I have learned something living among the Velthon. We are not so different. We both want safety for our families. We both want to create things of beauty. We both want to believe that our lives have meaning." He paused and looked at Lyra. "Humanity's greatest strength is not our weapons or our intelligence. It is our capacity to see good in others, even in those who appear to be our enemies. It is our willingness to trust, even when trust is difficult. It is our ability to forgive and to build something new from the ruins of the past." The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, they began to make noise. Humans cheered. Velthon made their sounds of approval. The sound grew louder and louder until it seemed to shake the foundations of the amphitheater. Lyra stood and took Jacob's hand. She raised their joined hands toward the sky. The crowd erupted. 1 year later, Jacob and Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the Velthon capital. Their child, born just days before, slept in a crib in the room behind them. The child was small and fragile, with pale skin like its mother, but with some features from its father. It was not fully Velthon. It was not fully human. It was something new, something that represented the hope of both species. On the horizon, ships from both species worked together in orbit. Humans and Velthon walked the streets of the capital together. Not all of them were friends. Not all of them trusted each other completely. But they had chosen to try. They had chosen to build instead of destroy. Jacob wrapped his arm around Lyra. She leaned against him, her alien skin cool against his human warmth. "Do you think it will last?" Lyra asked. "Yes," Jacob said. He was not certain, but he believed it with all of his heart. As long as there are people like us, people who are willing to choose peace and love over war and hatred, it will last. Lyra turned and looked at their child, sleeping peacefully in the crib. Our daughter will grow up knowing peace, she said. She will never know the war. She will see Velthon and humans as one people. Maybe, Jacob said. Or maybe she will lead them further than we could. Maybe she will create something greater than we can imagine. They stood together in the dying light of the sun, watching the galaxy turn. The war was over. The real work of peace was just beginning. But for the first time in generations, both species looked toward a shared future instead of toward weapons of war. Jacob had married an alien princess to end the war. Now, standing on the balcony of an imperial palace on an alien world, holding his wife's hand and watching their child sleep, he understood that he had done far more than that. He had taken the first step towards something that had never existed before. He had created a bridge between worlds. And on that bridge, two very different species would learn to walk together, step by step, day by day, toward a future neither of them could have imagined alone. The military transport delivered Jacob to Earth orbit in silence. No messages had come from Lyra, no word from the Velthon capital. For 2 weeks, the human government had no information about what was happening in the Velthon Empire. The silence was worse than any news. When Jacob arrived at the Earth Defense Council headquarters, he was brought immediately to a high-security meeting room. The generals and politicians were already there, waiting for him. Admiral Patricia Gomez sat at the head of the table. She had been in command of human forces during the war. She was a hard woman, gray-haired, and lined with the stress of military command. "We've been trying to reach you," she said without greeting. "What happened? Why did the Velthon let you go?" Jacob told them everything. He told them about the Emperor's death, about Kess's plans, about Lyra's sacrifice, about her plan to challenge Kess for control of the Empire. When he finished, the room was completely silent. Admiral Gomez leaned back in her chair. "She might be dead already," she said bluntly. "This plan depends on her surviving long enough to gather political support. But Kess controls the military. If he moves against her, she will have no one to protect her." "We have to do something," Jacob said. "We have to help her." "How?" demanded General Kevin Wallace, the head of the Air Force. "We have no military presence near the Velthon homeworld. We have no alliance with any Velthon factions. Even if we wanted to help, we could not reach her in time." "Then prepare for war," Jacob said. His voice was cold and steady, because if Lyra fails, Kess will attack. The treaty will be worthless. Everything will restart. Prepare your forces. Gather your ships. Be ready. Admiral Gomez nodded slowly. "I will do that," she said. "But Jacob, you should know something. When word spread that you had abandoned the princess, our own people turned against you. Some are calling you a traitor. Some say you sold us to the Velthon. Some think you should be arrested and tried for treason." Jacob felt nothing at this news. Betrayal and blame were small prices compared to what Lyra was facing. "Let them say what they want," he said. "I did what had to be done." Over the next month, the human military mobilized. Ships were moved to defensive positions. Weapons were manufactured. Young people were brought into military training. The human government prepared for a war that everyone hoped would not come. But during all of this, Jacob felt like a ghost. He moved through the world, but he was not truly present. Every moment of every day, he thought about Lyra. He imagined her in the palace, fighting for her life. He imagined her dead. He imagined her succeeding in taking control of the empire. The military blamed him for the marriage. The government officials questioned his loyalty. Some people on the street recognized him and spat at him. He was called a traitor, a fool, and a man who had given his enemies access to all of humanity's secrets. Admiral. Gomez was the only one who continued to believe in him. She spent time with Jacob, talking about the war and about Lyra. She never blamed him for the marriage. She understood that he had done the only thing that could be done. Then, 3 weeks after Jacob's return to Earth, a message came through the encrypted channel that no one else knew about. The message was long and detailed. It came from Lyra's personal communication officer, a Velthon named Shen, who had been loyal to the royal family for decades. The message said that Lyra had challenged General Cass for control of the Empire. The challenge had been accepted. The ritual combat would take place in 1 day's time. The message also said that Cass was confident of victory. He had prepared an announcement declaring that humans were responsible for the Emperor's death, that Jacob had poisoned the old leader as part of a plot to weaken the Velthon. When Cass defeated Lyra in combat, he would declare the treaty void. The war would restart immediately. Jacob brought this message to Admiral Gomez. "This is it," she said. "This is the moment we find out whether your wife can actually do what she claimed. If she wins, the treaty holds. If she loses, we go to war. Full mobilization, complete assault, no mercy." Jacob sat in a command center with 300 soldiers and officers around him. They watched screens showing the Velthon capital. Ships moved in the orbital zones. Ground forces stood ready. Everything was prepared for war. Then, a new message came through. The ritual combat had ended. Lyra had won. General Cass was dead. Lyra was now Empress of the Velthon Empire. But the victory was not complete. Cass had been popular with some of the military generals. His supporters now demanded that Lyra prove herself as a leader. They demanded that she show strength. Several generals called for an immediate attack on human worlds to prove that the Velthon Empire was not weak. Lyra's response came through an official transmission that was sent to the entire Velthon military and to the Earth Defense Council. Simultaneously, she announced that she was sending a human diplomat to Earth with a new treaty proposal. She announced that she was taking personal control of the military forces that had been loyal to Cass. She announced that any general who did not accept her as Empress would be stripped of rank and expelled from the military. And she announced that the peace with humanity would continue stronger than before. The message was clear and strong. Lyra was not asking for permission. She was ordering the Velthon to accept peace. The response from the Velthon military was mixed. Some generals accepted immediately. Some demanded to speak with Lyra personally. But none of them directly challenged her authority. She had defeated Cass in ritual combat. She was Empress. The law was clear. Admiral Gomez looked at Jacob with something like respect in her eyes. "Your wife just started a civil war in the Velthon Empire," she said. "She is fighting her own people to keep the peace with us. That takes courage." "She will win," Jacob said. He said it with absolute certainty, though he did not know if it was true. "How do you know?" Gomez asked. "Because she loves me," Jacob said. "And because she loves peace more than she loves power." Cass wanted to conquer. Lyra wants to build. The Velthon may follow a warrior, but they will respect the builder more in the long run. Over the next week, the situation developed. More messages came from Lyra. She was consolidating her power, rewarding the generals who had supported her, isolating those who had been loyal to Cass. She was restructuring the Vanayne government to eliminate the positions that Cass had used to gain power. Most importantly, she was preparing for Jacob to come home. A Velthon battleship was sent to Earth orbit. It carried Lyra's personal guard and a message that said Jacob was invited to return to the Velthon capital. Not as a prisoner, not as a slave, but as the husband of the Empress. As a partner in the new government she was building. Jacob stood in Admiral Gomez's office and looked at the orders he had been given. He was to board the Velthan ship and travel to their capital. He would be vulnerable. He would be far from human protection. If Lyra had turned against him, if this was a trap, he would be killed. But Jacob did not hesitate. He gathered his things and prepared to leave. "Take care of Earth," he told Admiral Gomez. "Take care of your wife," she replied. Jacob boarded the Velthan ship. The doors closed behind him. The ship began its journey back to the Velthan capital, back to Lyra, back to whatever future they would build together. On his way out of Earth orbit, Jacob watched his home planet grow smaller. He did not know if he would ever see it again, but he knew that Lyra was waiting for him, and that was enough. The encrypted message arrived when Jacob was conducting a weapons inspection on the northern edge of the colony. The encryption code was one that only Lyra and Jacob knew. His hand shook as he opened it. The message was simple. "The Emperor is dead. Return to the capital immediately. Bring your husband. Do not trust anyone else." Jacob read it 3 times to make sure he understood. The Emperor was dead. The old leader of the Velthan Empire, the one who had agreed to the peace treaty, was gone. This changed everything. He found Lyra in the colony's communication center. She was speaking with Velthan officials about trade agreements, but her face remained perfectly calm. When she saw Jacob, she made an excuse and left the room. They met in a private chamber, sealed from listening devices. "The Emperor is truly dead?" Jacob asked. Lyra nodded. "He has been dying for months. The medical systems kept him alive, but his body finally gave up. The death was hidden from everyone except the royal family and the highest generals. Now, the news is spreading across the empire. And Kess?" Jacob asked. "General Kess controls the military forces near the capital. The other generals are scattered across the empire. When I arrive at the capital for the succession ceremony, Kess will be waiting. He will arrest me or kill me or both. Then he will demand that the Earth Council surrender completely. When you refuse, he will use my death as an excuse to tear up the treaty." Jacob felt anger rise in his chest. He wanted to find Kess and kill him with his bare hands. But that would not save Lyra or humanity. "We run," Jacob said. "We take a ship and we leave. We disappear into space where they cannot find us." Lyra shook her head. "If we run, we abandon all Velthan who believe in peace. We abandon my people to Kess and the military commanders who serve him. They will control the empire for decades. The war will never truly end. There will always be another conflict, another attack. Then what do we do?" Jacob asked. He already knew the answer would be terrible. "I return to the capital," Lyra said. "I face Kess. I challenge him for control of the empire." "He will kill you," Jacob said. The words came out harsh and loud. "Perhaps," Lyra said calmly, "but the succession ceremony requires a challenge. Any royal blood can demand single combat with the next in line for the throne. If I challenge Kess, if I fight him and win, I become empress. If I lose, then I die, but at least I tried." "There has to be another way," Jacob said. But even as he spoke, he knew there was not. Lyra stood up and moved close to Jacob. She took both of his hands in hers. "There is something you must do," she said. "You must leave the capital before the ceremony. You must return to Earth and make it clear to your government that you have abandoned our marriage and our cause. You must make yourself look weak and frightened. You must make Kess believe that you are running back to your own people with your tail between your legs." "Why?" Jacob asked, though he was starting to understand. "Because Kess is a soldier, and soldiers respect strength. If you show weakness, if you run away, Kess will feel confident. He will lower his guard. He will believe that the humans are defeated and that I am alone. This will give me time to gather my own supporters. The old noble families remember the days before the conquest wars. They remember peace. They will side with me if they believe I can actually win. Jacob wanted to scream and rage. He wanted to find a way to save them both. But Lyra was right. There was no other way. When will you leave? Jacob asked. In 2 days, Lyra said. We will travel together to the capital. We will be seen arriving together. Then, you will have a public argument with me. You will say that I am a traitor to my own species, that I have used my position to weaken the Vel'Than. You will say that you want no part of the royal court. You will demand to be taken back to Earth. The Vel'Than who support Kes will believe that our marriage was a failure. They will believe that the humans have lost faith in peace. And if your challenge fails? Jacob asked. If Kes kills you? Lyra's eyes were dark and serious. Then the Vel'Than will eventually attack Earth again. Kes will gather the military and he will come for you. You must be ready for that. You must prepare your people for the worst. Jacob pulled Lyra close. He held her against his chest. For the first time since they had married, he felt truly connected to her. She was not the alien princess who had terrified him. She was a person brave and determined, willing to sacrifice everything for something she believed in. I love you, Jacob said. The words surprised him, but they were true. Lyra pulled back and looked at his face. I know, she said. I have felt it through our connection. This is why I must do this. Because I love you too. And I cannot let you spend your life in a war that might have been prevented. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Jacob and Lyra packed things and made plans. They wrote messages to the Earth government that explained the situation. They recorded videos for the leaders of both the human colony and the Vel'Than forces. Then, they boarded a transport ship and headed toward the Vel'Than capital. The journey took 6 days through space. Jacob spent most of that time with Lyra, simply being near her. They did not talk much. There was not much left to say. They both knew what was coming. They both knew that everything would change, and not all of them might survive the changes. When they arrived at the capital, the city was magnificent and terrible. Tall towers made of dark metal stretched toward the sky. Ships filled the orbital docks. The power and strength of the Vel'Than Empire was impossible to ignore. They were escorted to the royal palace. General Kes met them in the Great Hall. He was taller than most Vel'Than, with scars across his pale face that told him 100 battles. His black eyes looked at Jacob with contempt. The human returns, Kes said. How long has it been since your government ordered you to abandon the princess? Jacob had prepared for this moment. He stepped forward, his face angry and cold. I came to tell you myself, Jacob said. This marriage was a mistake. I will not stay in the Vel'Than Empire 1 moment longer. I demand to be returned to Earth immediately. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. But they did their job. Kes smiled, and it was a terrible smile. He believed every word. Leave, Kes said, gesturing to his soldiers. Take the human to the detention block. He will be shipped back to Earth within the week. As Jacob was dragged away, he looked back at Lyra one final time. She stood in the Great Hall, surrounded by Vel'Than soldiers, completely alone. But her eyes were calm. She was ready for what came next. Jacob was locked in a cell on a military transport ship. From the small window of his cell, he could see the Vel'Than capital growing smaller as the ship left orbit. Somewhere down there, his wife was fighting for her survival and for the future of 2 species. And he could not help her. All he could do was wait and hope that she was as strong as she believed.